Landlords in New York State say the proposed good cause eviction law is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over a topic that I have covered a lot in the past, even though in the last few weeks I haven't really talked about it. It's the proposed good cause eviction law up in New York State. Now, for those who don't know, and this is the first time they're hearing about it, the state of New York has proposed a law that would only allow landlords to evict a tenant for a very small number of reasons, okay? So if a tenant is under a 1-year lease, right, and the landlord decides, hey, I don't want to renew this lease on this tenant anymore, and I want to do something else with my property, well, the landlord is no longer allowed to do that, and they have to keep that tenant in there as long as that tenant wants to stay. Now, what they put in this law, part of the law is that if the landlord says, well, I want to increase my rents in my property up to, let's say, 10% higher than what they are now because they are below the market rate. Well, the good cause eviction law in New York State puts in a little stipulation that says, oh, you can only raise your rents up to a certain percentage. Otherwise, it's seen as, trying to pressure the tenant out of the property. So what it really is doing is it's putting in place a rent control over the entire state, including over small mom and pop landlords who only own 1 or 2 properties. There already was rent control up in New York State, but this one will cover every single property in the state. And with the eviction protections thrown in there as well, that means that in New York there will be basically a forever eviction moratorium and a forever rent control on all the properties. This would be devastating to all landlords in the entire state. It's already a very, very tough state to be a landlord, and this will only make it worse. So yeah, the article I'm going over today, it's actually, they talk to a landlord, and the landlord is giving their opinion of all of this nonsense, okay? And they, being a little bit closer, they have more information than I do. I read the articles, but I don't live in New York. I live in Omaha, Nebraska. So I find all of it interesting because I could see these laws passing in other parts of the country, including where I do invest, okay? And I don't want that to happen. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know, what do you think of these good cause eviction laws? I know I've asked this question before, but do you think that this will actually help the tenants, or do you think that this will end up hurting the tenants, and why do you believe that? I'll tell you right now, I think that this sort of law will make it worse for tenants. It'll be harder to find affordable housing, harder for tenants to rent places, because you know what landlords are going to do when these laws pass? They are going to get out of the rental property business. They're going to say, hey, I don't want to be a landlord anymore, so I'm going to sell to an owner occupant, or I'm going to convert my building over to condos so I don't have to deal with this nonsense. There will be less rental units overall. Developers will be like, hey, we can't make a profit, so we're not going to be building a whole lot of these new projects like we were in the past. This is what happens, okay? You saw what happened up in St. Paul, Minnesota when they passed their rent control ordinance, okay? 80% of all the new development got canceled. Well, this same thing, these new laws up in New York State, if they pass, they could have a devastating effect on new development throughout the entire state. So let's get into this article. It's coming from CBS6Albany.com, and it says, landlords fear New York's proposed good cause eviction legislation. Yeah, let's get into it. Some landlords in the capital region say proposed state eviction laws are making the rental business a losing proposition. State lawmakers have proposed good cause eviction bills. The goal is to set standards for when evictions are appropriate and to prevent drastic rent increases, all to protect tenants. The bill is sponsored by Senator Julia Salazar of Brooklyn and Assemblywoman Pamela Hunter of Syracuse. Salazar's justification is that landlords are evicting tenants without just cause at a high rate. Terrence Wansley, the communications coordinator for the Capital District Association of Rental Property Owners and longtime Capital Region landlord, said. So yeah, the politician gets up there and they throw out this argument, right, that basically large numbers of renters are suffering under, this. They're getting evicted for bad reasons or unlawfully or whatever, right? Well, that's complete garbage. It's complete BS. And I guarantee that is not what's happening at all, okay? I guarantee that 99% of renters are not facing these issues at all. But when they put these laws into place, guess what? The bad landlords, they don't care. They're going to keep doing whatever they're doing. The good landlords, now they got to jump through all these hoops, all this extra paperwork. They get in all the legal trouble. They're paying all the lawyers trying to help them, etc., right? So that they can comply with this law. And so, yeah, the good landlords get punished and they're like, you know what? I don't even want to deal with this. I'm getting out of the rental business. Or they put their screening criteria so high that now, the tenants before, they can't even find a place to rent. Not only that, but the rents for everyone will go up. They will. I guarantee they'll go up. The harder you make it for landlords to make money, the worse it's going to be. And that means the rents are going to go up and, housing will be so much less affordable. But let me continue. Wansley said that's not the case, especially with mom and pop landlords in upstate New York who own just a few units. Wansley and other advocates are now speaking out against this proposed legislation. Coming off the eviction moratorium, they faced many, many issues, and this would just be something else that would make it hard to sustain a living, Cara Rafferty, president of the New York Capital Region Apartment Association, said. They say the legislation outlines good cause reasons for eviction, but Wansley says it would have to be proven before a judge, which is a long and difficult process. Yeah, and see, that's part of the issue right there. They put these reasons up there. The landlord can still evict for nuisance or whatever, but the landlord has to prove it in front of a judge. What that means is that, there's going to be lots of attorney fees. There's going to be lots of money that the landlord loses to months and months and months of lost rent because, hey, they got a backlog of cases in New York. They got a backlog of cases caused by the eviction moratorium up in New York State. So before they even get to see the judge, it's going to be months. And when they finally do get to see the judge, hey, guess what? A lot of these jurisdictions in New York State are paying for lawyers for these tenants. So even if the tenant has no right to stay in the property and the landlord is 100% in the right, they still, a lot of cases, can't get these tenants out of their properties. So this is only making the issue worse. And it's hard for me to believe that they can't see that. The only thing they can see is, these poor tenants, like tenants have never abused the system. Like tenants have never cheated landlords out of their money. Instead of looking at it from a fair and impartial view, they look at it as landlords bad, tenants good. Like it can be that simple. It's never that simple, okay? Never. We have non-payment, criminal activity, nuisance, destruction of property. There's a litany of things, he said, but it'll take you 18 months to do so, and the courts are backed up beyond belief. You could have loud parties. You could have a smoker in a non-smoking building. You could have pets that are against the lease. You could essentially be hooting and hollering from the rooftop at all hours of the night. But if you paid your rent, you can't evict, Rafferty said. They say what happens is the good neighbor who is upset winds up leaving the apartment and letting the bad tenant win. Yeah, and that's another issue that they don't talk about a lot, okay? So you have a bad tenant up in your unit, right? And let's say, it's the smoking issue like they talked about, right? So you own an apartment building. It's got multiple apartments in there. It's a non-smoking building. You have a tenant in there who is in there smoking every day, right? And the smoke, it can go through the walls in some of these buildings, okay? It can go through the ventilation system. Some of them have a shared ventilation system. So the smoke is seeping into the other units in your apartment building from this one bad tenant. So you were like, hey, I'm just not going to renew this person's lease, and that person can move about their business and go somewhere where they can smoke all they want, but they can't stay in my property. Well, you just can't not renew their lease anymore. They continue to pay their rent, and they broke your lease rules, but you have to go to court and prove that, you have good cause, that this is a nuisance, that this is a lease violation. And because the courts are backed up by 18 months, That means that tenant gets to stay in your building, scaring away all your other good tenants, pissing you off, doing further damage to your property for the next 18 months while you wait to see a judge. That's why this law is wrong. That's why this sort of law should never pass, and that's why I'm 100% against it. But, I'm not going to finish the rest of this article. Just know that, these good cause eviction laws, they are bad news for landlords, okay? And they take away property rights that landlords should have in every state, in every jurisdiction. But unfortunately, in places like New York, they just don't.